What is up, guys? Welcome to a new video. I haven't done a proper educational video for a little while, and just so you know why, like basically YouTube and how it works now with this algorithm basically force you to have like caps titles and to make them more interesting if you want the site to promote the video at all. It sucks, but it means like making this kind of content doesn't actually always help my channel anymore, but I'm going to do it anyway, and hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully it helps. So I've done placements on a few accounts now, and safe to say season 7 is a little bit different than other seasons, but timestamps are down below. By the way, we're going to cover the season 7 meta, early season tips, and also the mindset that helped me become a lot better or climb a lot more in the end. We're going to start with the mindset one because this is probably the most important part of the video actually. So when I started playing and when I was actually really good at this game, not now anymore sadly, it was a lot more about could I carry solo on my own. It was so much easier to display skill as an individual, but now it's way more about team play and how good you are as a team, I think. Sure, like one person can carry, they can have a stand-up performance, I look really good and stuff, but it's harder to just carry 1v5 I think in a team fight. Now the best way I can describe this is with an example. So it's actually a lot like driving a car. If you guys drive now or you're going to learn to drive, this is kind of how it is. Driving a car is not that hard on its own really, just simple things to remember and to learn which you get used to over time. The hard part is actually when you're driving, you're reacting to each situation which is often different and making sure that you don't mess up. In reality though, the harder part is actually making sure some idiot doesn't hit you rather than you hitting someone else. Like you're driving your car sure, but you're actually watching everyone else to make sure they aren't dumb and they don't hit you with theirs. League nowadays is actually very similar to this. The mechanics of the game are not that hard on their own. Some are more difficult, but you learn them with time and practice. The hard part is actually choosing the right thing to do in situations which are always very slightly different. Often it's actually knowing what you should do rather than if you can do it. In reality though, the hardest part about the game is making sure some idiot on your team doesn't mess up the game for you. You're playing your champion, but you're watching your teammates to make sure they aren't dumb and they don't screw theirs up. As weird as it sounds, this is the attitude and way of looking at League that got me to Diamond 1 in Season 5. The game was changing, my style of hard carry wasn't really working anymore. Looking at it like this though meant that I was thinking way more about, okay, I can do this, but what are my teammates going to do if I do that? It's kind of like playing for your team is exhausting. It's not the most fun ever, but it's the most efficient way to actually climb the ladder. So what this actually means is you're thinking about what your team will do when you do something. If I engage, what will they do? You pick fights or plays that don't require them to do something correct. If it's like, we can win this fight if my support engages and exhausts at the right time, then you probably don't want to do it because you're relying and you're trusting them to do something. It sounds really sad, but that's actually kind of what the game has come down to as well. But it's also about helping your teammates early. If they're losing, you help them in their lane, or you win your lane harder, which actually helps them indirectly. They've lost their lane, that's not your fault, right? But you can roam and bail them out. You don't want to fight them in chat as well and make them even more irrational. They're already frustrated, they're already angry at people, and like the last thing you really want to do is to make that worse. The next one is farming. It's the #1 thing in the game now for me at least. Like you farm well and you will climb. You have more gold, you don't really rely on anyone else. Games aren't always going to be the same, but your farming skill is like your driving skill. That is something personal to you that you can actually control game in, game out, how well you farm and how much gold you're going to generate. The last thing is you should be thinking 30 seconds or more ahead in the game. If I go bot to clear this wave, what are my teammates likely to do in the next 30 seconds while I do it? Are they going to back off and not get engaged on? Well, honestly, probably not. So let's either stay and just miss the CS or show but be ready to instantly run back. That should give you a good idea of how I see the game now and what you should really be thinking about if you want to improve. It's not going to be a magical fix, it's not going to make you challenge it instantly, but it's how you start learning to improve and climbing. And by the way, it's actually going to work in any single team game really. So the next thing is there's been a lot of people wondering how the season works or whether something is wrong, complaining about things, so I can't wait to go over some stuff and clear it up. So solo queue right now in Season 7 is going to be different to how it is going to be in a few months. The whole ladder has just moved down, so gold players will be in like silver to gold. People are getting really frustrated right now because they're like, I was plat 1 and now I'm gold 1, and honestly that doesn't really matter. So are the rest of the ladder. Everyone is in the same boat. Pride is legit one of the worst things in the early season. Like you are probably going to be better than a lot of players in your games, but that doesn't really matter. Quality of games is the thing that leads on from that really. There's a massive spread of players right now in the solo queue. Like the whole of gold, some low plat, plus some high silver could be in the same game. It is actually even worse this season. I'm not sure why. Maybe Flex Q messed it up in the preseason, I'm not sure, but the point is Pride sucks ass because if someone does well, they think they deserve the win and the team are holding them back. They think their teammates are trash, they're monkeys, boost animals, whatever you want to call them, and to be honest, it's probably true, but that attitude isn't going to help, so just like swallow it and play. This is what you get for playing early season ranked. You don't have my sympathy because you're literally queuing up to have this experience. It's always like this. It is always a mess. Players are in Challenger now or Master who won't be able to get there again after a month or so when the better players catch back up. It's just how it works. Luck is one thing with the early preseason, which I actually hate using this word, but early season solo queue queue is a lot about luck, to be honest. It kind of comes down a little bit to, do you have the team with high silvers or with low plats, right? Sure, it's not going to be a free win, but a plat top laner should be able to beat a silver top laner, in theory. Some games your bot are going to feed like a monster and there's nothing you can really do. It's unlucky, you just have to move on to the next one and not let it phase you. Role-wise as well, mid and jungle are always the roles that impact the game the most, and especially right now. Jungle controls every single lane, they get themselves fed, and they win lanes for their teammates. It doesn't matter how good or bad their teammates are if the jungle is winning it for them. Mid lane, you can 1v1, which you can hopefully win. You roam to other lanes to win those as well, and you're really, really good at mid lane, so you can control the game in team fights. This season is actually even worse though. Like, honestly, with tanks a lot top lane, they can't just take over and really control the game, so that's slightly worse. With supports, Redemption is OP, so more team fighting supports now, not really like early win your lane super hard, and AD carries are just like a bot lane party, right? They're weak early game anyway, and especially in Season 7 after the changes that are worse, they can't impact the game as much, and they're kind of at the mercy of jungle and mid if they get camped or not. With junglers, especially this season actually, who are probably the #1 role to carry a game right now, they have more gold than normal and better farm. Other laners are weaker, so it's easier to gank them and get more out of it. Damage junglers as well carry really hard. This is always how it works in solo queue, especially early season, because you can help bad players or help good ones snowball, but right now in Season 7 it's even worse, so that's why you're seeing a lot of really good win rate junglers and mid laners, while other lanes are just average. You're gonna see in a minute when we go over the Season 7 meta, plus what we've said already about the roles and stuff, but yes, actually the meta and how the game is has made the effects of early season worse, I think. It's not just you going crazy thinking games are pretty crap at the moment and worse than usual. It is. It's how it normally is, but worse for a little bit. Remember, with all of this though, this will change in a month or two. It's gonna settle down and be fine again, so don't worry too much. I just wanted to point out all of this stuff really to keep in mind, because I get asked about it all the time. Now, the last thing is the Season 7 meta. So what I normally do with champions and stuff is go over the best ones, not really what is meta right now. The difference is my stuff is usually about beating the meta. This is just talking about what fits the general game and what is very consistent, good, and strong, but maybe not the overall best. This should give you an idea of what to expect right now and whether your champion pool is roughly gonna fit here or not really, but it doesn't mean that your champion is bad or anything. You really want to be paying attention to the criteria, why I say these are good. So for top lane, it's going to be tanks, honestly, that Poppy, Nautilus, Maokai, and Malphite if they're heavy AD. You have crowd control, some damage, you can build full tank, and you have a decent-ish lane phase as well, and early to mid-game fights. That would be the kind of criteria you want to look for a top lane tank, especially these four are really good. And also for carry laners, Camille, Yasuo, Fiora, and Darius, there's a good chance you're going to beat the tanks or just outscale them. And remember, tanks aren't actually that good like 6 items into the game when carries have damage and pen as well to get through your defense. Garen is the last one, a bit of both, I guess. Only really builds one offense item though, which is Black Cleaver, and then usually just like builds full tank afterwards, but he shreds tanks like a madman with his new E, which is really, really good. For the jungle, it's going to be damage or tanks with damage, really. The top tier would be like Hecarim and Vi, because they build damage, but they're also tanky and they have some crowd control. They're heavy gankers, which is great. They're good farmers and they're very well rounded. So that is like the ideal you want to strive for. In reality, a lot of champions are not going to be able to do everything as well as those ones. So really, we're going to be carrying with ganks. It'd be like Shaco, Lee Sin, Kha'Zix, Elise. You have this focus on ganking early and getting ahead. The idea is to outpace, which means you stay ahead of the enemy AD and mid laner, and you can 1v1 them quite easily. You're going to be affecting the lanes a lot, snowballing them, and hopefully helping your teammates. Even if they're not as good as the opponents, they'll still come out on top. Tanks would be like Zac, Sejuani, Rek'Sai, Rammus, maybe. They're more situational. They don't work in every game, but tank junglers are not that good anyway. The jungle has more income. It's harder to farm. It means more gold though to spend on items and stay ahead of the other carry roles, and that is why damage is so good. Top tanks are also better, which is why we have tanks there and damage in the jungle normally. You also have these farm junglers though. Shyvana and Nocturne are good examples. Both can gank, both carry with damage and get tanky as well, but power farmers and abuse how much gold you can get if you farm properly. For mid lane, we're really looking at carries and utility mages. Those are the kind of two groups I think of meta mids. Ziggs, Ahri, Katarina, and Syndra are good examples of carry ones. Their primary job is to just kill stuff, and normally quite quickly as well. They have a good lane phase, but an even better team fight is one of the biggest things. They're able to roam well, or they can push super hard, but either way, they're controlling the flow of the game mid, and they're staying ahead of their opponent. Utility mages are like Orianna, Lux, and actually Victor maybe as well. The difference here is that they may be more passive in the lane phase, but they're designed to carry and help their team to carry as well. Victor in his current state, I'd actually place in here and not carry, because you have the zone control with your W, lasers from the back, your ultimate zone as well. All of those tools that, yes, can kill stuff, but unlock your true potential when sometimes used to keep them away while you just win fights in the rest of the team. With AD carries, it's going to be utility and late game carries, but honestly, this is a pretty backseat role at the moment unless you can win 2v2 and you don't get camp, both of which are sadly not very likely. Late game carries are like Twitch, Kaylin, Jinx, Vayne. So there's two sides of why you'd pick these. The first one is it's hard to win your lane now and carry anyway. Other lanes are going to have more gold, they have more impact just as champions, how they work with their kits, and so you don't really have a ton like of impact even with the lead. This is your backup really, you're going to carry late game anyway, so it doesn't really matter. The other side is that if your bot lane is a party and you come out on top of it, then you can reach your items sooner and reach carry state sooner and will be able to impact the game earlier. Even if you don't, you have the late game backup we said before. So really, it's kind of a risk-free pick. You're not going to be carrying the most mid game, but you will eventually. The utility side of things is like Varus, Ezreal, and Caitlyn. So these champions don't necessarily need loads of help from their team and they can be self-sufficient. You're playing here to do as much work as you can, but you don't need babysitting either. They're kind of champions that can help your team carry rather than hard carrying themselves. Even though they can, they don't have to. I guess basically a good way of saying it is they are good champions to play to get carried, I guess. But there's also the early game people like Jhin and Misfortune. They're really good in the lane phase and into mid game team fights. Your focus here is more on winning early and using ability damage rather than being taken along for the ride. Finally, with support, this is Redemption users mostly, probably the most versatile role, as in you pick anything, you pick Redemption and you can win the game. Redemption supports are defensive ones like Janna, Sona, Soraka, and Nami. There are a lot of others, basically everyone builds it, but like they can play well and keep the AD alive in the lane phase, let them farm usually. They defend against ganks as well so they don't get boned, but honestly support is so free to pick whatever they want because it's not about the lane phase much anymore. They're designed to survive lane and do well in team fights. The playmakers are like Blitzcrank, Morgana, Braum maybe. These are the few that actually want to go for kills in the lane, but at the same time there's some decent team fight stuff mid game. I normally don't do this because it's kind of vague in a way. A lot of things can do these jobs, a lot of champions can do those jobs, but it's more about who can do them the best, I think. Anyway, that should give you a really good idea. I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned something. Leave it a like if you did. Thank you very much for watching, but for now, let's go to the robots.